This resume is garbage. He tossed IT in my face. Everyone watched. Yesterday, his father called me personally. We lost $30 million. Only you can save US. The son's face when he saw me. Welcome to cheat sheet tales where loyalty dies, lies, bleed out, and the truth hits like a slap to the face. These aren't just stories. They're confessions soaked in betrayal and regret. Ever spotted a red flag when it was already too late? Say it in the comments. Let's tear into today's tale. The resume struck my cheek. Pages scattering across the polished floor like autumn leaves in a storm. The staple caught my skin, leaving a tiny scratch that stung less than his words. "This is garbage," he announced, his voice echoing through the conference room where 5 other executives sat in uncomfortable silence. "Try harder next time." Nolan Wick, heir to his father's financial empire, stood over me with the smug confidence of someone who'd never earned anything in his life. 28 years old, same age as me, worlds apart in privilege. My face burned as I knelt to gather my credentials. My economics degree from a state university. My financial certifications earned through night classes while working full-time. The market prediction methodology I developed that had outperformed standard models by 17% over 3 years. All dismissed as garbage by someone who'd been gifted a corner office because of his last name. "Thank you for your time," I managed to say, though my voice trembled. The weight of 10 eyes on my back made each step toward the door feel like wading through concrete. In the elevator, I finally exhaled, clutching my papers to my chest. I've spent weeks preparing for this interview, believing my innovations could benefit this prestigious firm. Instead, I received a public execution. Walking out of that gleaming skyscraper, I made a silent promise to myself. This moment wouldn't define me, it would arm me. Before I tell you what happened next, can I ask you something? Have you ever noticed how many people watch these stories but never hit like or subscribe? If you're enjoying this journey so far, take a second to support the channel because trust me, you'll want to be notified when the next chapter of someone's revenge drops. Now, back to my story. My name is Nova Nightingale, not the name my parents gave me, but the one I chose when I realized this world rewards memorable impressions. I grew up in a small apartment above my grandmother's bookstore, raised on equal parts literature and practicality. Numbers tell stories, too, she'd say, teaching me to track inventory and calculate profits before I learned multiplication in school. By 16, I was managing the store's finances. By 20, I'd earned a scholarship to study economics. And by 25, I developed a market prediction system that incorporated variables most traditional models, ignored cultural trends, political undercurrents, and psychological patterns in consumer behavior. For 3 years, I'd refined this methodology at Waters Tone Financial, a smaller firm that took a chance on me when larger companies wouldn't look past my lack of Ivy League credentials. My approach wasn't conventional, but my results spoke volumes. I consistently predicted market shifts weeks before they occurred, which is why I believe Wick Financial Advisory Group might see my value. I was wrong. The day after my humiliation, I returned to my desk at Waters Tone with new determination. My boss, Theodora Waters Tone, a 60-year-old woman who'd built her company from nothing, noticed something different about me. "What happened?" she asked, leaning against my cubicle. I told her everything. The interview, the resume thrown in my face, the burning shame. When I finished, Theodora didn't offer sympathy. Instead, she pulled up a chair. "Ellie, do you know why I hired you? When your credentials were still fresh ink." I shook my head. "Because you see patterns others miss. That's rare and valuable." She tapped my computer screen. "Show me again how your system works." For the next hour, I walked her through my methodology, how I tracked seemingly unrelated data points, how I'd built algorithms that identified connections between market behavior and human psychology, how I could predict not just what would happen, but why. When I finished, Theodora was silent for a long moment. "I'm promoting you," she finally said, head of market analysis. "You'll have a team, a budget, and a mission. Make this methodology bulletproof." "Why now?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "Because sometimes the best motivation comes from proving someone wrong." The next 18 months transformed everything. My team grew from 2 people to 12. My methodology became more sophisticated, more accurate. When an unexpected market downturn hit the financial sector, our clients remained protected while others hemorrhaged money. Major clients began to notice. Then they began to switch to us. Industry publications wrote about the anonymous analyst revolutionizing financial forecasting. I remained unnamed in these pieces. My choice. I wasn't ready to step into the spotlight. Not yet. Theodora understood my strategy. "You're building mystique," she said, smart. What I was actually building was a reputation that would travel ahead of my name. When the time came, I wanted the work to speak for itself. Then came the tremor no one saw coming. A seemingly stable foreign market collapsed overnight. Banks that had heavily invested began to fail. Financial institutions worldwide faced massive losses as the contagion spread. Everyone was caught off guard except us. 3 months earlier, my system had detected subtle warning signs, unusual trading patterns, small but significant shifts in currency values, political appointments that changed regulatory priorities. We'd moved our clients' investments to safer positions. While other firms watched their clients lose millions, ours remained secure. That's when the financial world really started talking about Water ST's mysterious market profit. Who was this person who had seen what armies of analysts at major firms had missed? The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing data with my team when Theodora appeared at the door, her expression unreadable. "My office," she said. "Now." I followed her, wondering what crisis had emerged. Inside, she closed the door and handed me her phone. "Someone wants to speak with you." I took the phone cautiously. "This is Nova Nightingale. Miss Nightingale." The deep voice on the other end sounded strained. "This is Preston Wick." My heart skipped. Preston Wick, founder and CEO of Wick Financial Advisory Group, Nolan's father. "We've lost 30 million. He continued without preamble. "Our analysts missed something crucial in this market collapse. Everyone says you're the only person who can help us understand what happened and prevent further damage." He didn't recognize my voice. Why would he? He hadn't been in the room when his son humiliated me. I caught Theodora's eye. She nodded. "Slightly. I'll need to see your data," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "All of it. Of course. Anything." The desperation in his voice was palpable. "Can you come to our offices this afternoon?" "I'll be there at 3. I replied, then handed the phone back to Theodora. After she ended the call, she studied me carefully. "You're going to help them." I nodded slowly. "I'm going to help them understand exactly what they missed." The elevator ride up to Pickwick's offices felt different this time. 18 months ago, I'd arrived hopeful, clutching a resume that represented years of hard work. Today, I arrived with Theodora beside me and power shifting invisibly into my hands. The receptionist led us to their main conference room, the same one where Nolan had thrown my resume in my face. The irony wasn't lost on me. Inside waited Preston Wick, 3 board members, and a team of analysts. They stood when we entered, faces drawn with worry. Miss Waters' tone. Preston greeted Theodora, then looked past her expectantly. "Where is your expert?" "You're looking at her," Theodora replied, gesturing to me. Confusion flashed across Preston's face. "Miss Nightingale, but you're the analyst who predicted the collapse." I finished for him. "Yes." Recognition dawned slowly on the faces of 2 executives who'd been present during my interview. Their discomfort was visible as they realized who I was. The door opened behind us, and Nolan Wick strode in carrying a tablet and looking harried. He glanced at me without recognition, then did a double take. His composed facade crumbled as memory clicked into place. "You," he said, the single word carrying both accusation and disbelief. I smiled. "Me?" Preston looked between us. "You to know each other." Before Nolan could speak, I answered, "Your son interviewed me for an analyst position 18 months ago. He found my resume lacking." The atmosphere in the room thickened with tension. "Well," Preston said, clearly uncomfortable, but too desperate to dwell on it. "We're grateful you're here. Now, we need to understand what happened. Show me your asterisk data," I said. For the next hour, I reviewed their analysis. The errors became immediately apparent. They relied on traditional models that ignored crucial indicators, exactly the kind my methodology was designed to catch. I stood at the head of the table, where once I'd been deemed unworthy, and laid out exactly what they'd missed. The subtle market indicators they'd overlooked. The connection points their analysts had failed to make. Your 30 million loss could have been prevented, I concluded. But that's not your biggest problem. Based on my analysis, you stand to lose another 90 million if you don't implement specific changes immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Asterisk. Preston Wick looked shell-shocked. "How certain are you?" 97%. I replied without hesitation. He exchanged glances with the board members, then turned to me. "Name your price. We need you." This was the moment I'd been preparing for since that day. I gathered my scattered resume from the floor. I could feel Nolan's eyes on me, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. I smiled. "I'm not for sale." Suzuki's face fell, but I continued. "I'll consult on one condition." "Anything," he said quickly. My condition surprised everyone. "I'll solve your crisis. But afterward, I want 15 minutes to present my resume to your board. Your son will sit through it without interruption." Nolan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "That's ridiculous." "We don't have time for done." Preston cut him off. "Now tell us how to stop the bleeding." "Wait, you're still here." "Good." Most people would have clicked away by now, missing the best part of the story. If you're invested in what happens next, make sure you're subscribed, because the revenge I'm about to describe, it's the kind that changes lives forever. Let me show you how I dismantled an empire with nothing but truth. For the next week, I worked closely with Pickwick's team, implementing the changes needed to protect their remaining assets. I was professional, thorough, and completely focused on the task at hand. If anyone noticed how I avoided being alone with Nolan, they didn't mention it. During this time, I observed the company culture from the inside. The nepotism was worse than I'd imagined. Qualified people were routinely passed over for promotions in favor of those with connections. Innovative ideas were squashed if they came from the wrong people. And Nolanwick was at the center of it all. A mediocre analyst with extraordinary power making decisions that affected millions of dollars and dozens of careers. What Preston Wick didn't know, what no one knew, was that during those 18 months, after my rejection, I had been doing more than refining my methodology. I'd been watching Wick, financial advisory group, carefully tracking their decisions, their failures, their stock price, and when their stock dipped following several poor quarters, I began quietly acquiring shares. Not enough to trigger any regulatory disclosures, but enough to gain a minor yet significant voting position when combined with others who shared my concerns about the company's direction. I had also been building relationships with their 3 largest institutional investors, providing them through intermediaries with insights that helped protect their investments in other areas. They didn't know me personally, but they knew my work and they trusted it. The day came for my 15-minute presentation to the board. Thanks to my help, Wick Financial had avoided the additional losses I'd predicted. They'd even begun to recover some of their position in the market. Preston Wick was in a much better mood than when we'd first met. "The floor is yours, Miss Nightingale," he said as the board members settled around the table. Though I'm not sure why you wanted this formality. Nolan sat as far from me as possible, his expression a mixture of boredom and disdain. I connected my laptop to the projection system, but instead of displaying my resume, I pulled up a series of graphs. This first chart shows WIC financial performance over the past 5 years. I began the red marks indicate major investment decisions made under Nolan Pickwick's direction. The board members leaned forward, suddenly more interested. As you can see, 84% of these decisions resulted in performances below market average. 26% resulted in significant losses. Nolan straightened in his chair. What is this? This isn't your resume. On the contrary, I replied calmly. This is exactly what my resume demonstrates. The ability to analyze data and identify problems. And right now, the data shows that the single biggest threat to this company's future is sitting at this table. Preston Pickwick's face darkened. Miss Nightingale, we agreed to let me present my resume without interruption. I finished for him. I'm doing exactly that. My resume is built on identifying patterns others miss. And I've identified a pattern here that's costing you millions. I advanced to the next slide, which compared the performance of departments under Nolan's supervision against industry benchmarks. The numbers were damning. This isn't personal. I continued, though we all knew it was at least partly. This is mathematical. Your company is underperforming because key decisions are made based on relationships rather than expertise. The room had grown very quiet. I could feel the weight of every eye on me. I'm not just showing you a problem, I said, advancing to my final slide. I'm offering a solution. The screen displayed my proposal, a restructuring of their executive team based on merit rather than tenure or connection, a new risk assessment protocol using my methodology, and a governance structure that would prevent any single person, no matter their last name, from making unchecked decisions. You asked my price for saving your company from losing $90 million, I said, looking directly at Preston. This is it. Implement these changes or watch your company continue its decline. One of the board members, an older woman I recognized as a former Securities and Exchange Commission chair, spoke up. What gives you the authority to demand such changes? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. 3 things, I answered. First, my track record of accurate predictions, which your CEO has already acknowledged. Second, my position as a shareholder with voting rights. This revelation caused several surprised looks around the table. And third, I continued, the support of your 3 largest institutional investors who have reviewed my proposal and agree with my assessment. I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. They've authorized me to inform you that if these changes aren't implemented, they're prepared to call for a vote of no confidence in current management. At the next shareholder meeting, the silence that followed was absolute. Preston Wick looked as though he'd been struck. Nolan's face had drained of all color. The board member who had questioned me nodded slowly. I move. We discuss Miss Nightingale's proposal immediately. Second, another board member quickly added, I gathered my things. I'll leave you to your discussion. You have my contact information when you reach a decision. As I walked toward the door, Preston Wick found his voice. Wait, you've been planning this all along. I paused with my hand on the door knob and looked back at the table of powerful people, who now hung on my every word from the moment your son threw my resume in my face and called it garbage. I replied evenly. I decided then that someday I'd show him exactly what he missed. I left them to decide their fate, knowing what the outcome would be. The numbers were on my side. They always had been. 3 days later, I received the call I'd been expecting. The board has voted, Preston Wick said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. They've accepted your proposal, all of it. I allowed myself a moment to savor the victory. I'm glad to hear it. They've also asked me to offer you a position, he continued, head of risk assessment and market strategy. You'd report directly to The board. Now, this was unexpected. I'd anticipated consulting work, not a permanent role. What about Nolan? I asked, unable to resist. There was a pause. My son will be reassigned to a more appropriate position given his abilities. Translation. Demoted. I'll need to think about it. I replied, though I already knew my answer. I'll get back to you tomorrow. That evening, I sat with Theodora on the rooftop patio of her brownstone, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of amber and gold. I'd told her everything. So, what will you do? She asked, swirling a glass of bourbon. If I take the position, I could transform their entire approach, implement my methodology across all their divisions. The impact would be massive, she finished for me. But that's not what I'm asking. What do you want, Nova? The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? Revenge. I'd already achieved that power. I'd proven I could acquire it. Recognition. The financial world was already whispering my name. I want to matter, I finally said. I want my work to matter. Theodore nodded slowly. Then you have your answer. The next morning, I called Preston Wick. I'll accept the position, I said with 3 conditions. Name them, he replied, eager to close the deal. First, I want to bring to analysts from my current team. Second, I want complete autonomy over the risk assessment methodology. And third, I paused, making sure my words would land with precision. I want Nolan to work directly under me for the first 6 months. There was a long silence. That last condition might be difficult. It's non-negotiable, I replied calmly. If he's going to remain at this company in any capacity, he needs to understand the methodology that saved it. Who better to teach him than me? Another pause. I'll speak with him. No, I said firmly. This isn't a negotiation between you and your son. This is a business decision between you and your new head of risk assessment. If the board doesn't agree to all 3 conditions, I walk. 2 hours later, he called back. The board accepts your conditions, all of them, and that's how for weeks after saving Wick. Financial from disaster. I walked into their headquarters as their new head of risk assessment and market strategy. My office, larger than Nolan's had been, overlooked the city from the 40th floor. On my desk sat a potted plant with a card from the board. Thank you for your vision. My first order of business was a company-wide meeting to introduce the new risk assessment protocols. Every employee from entry-level analysts to senior executives attended either in person or remotely. I stood at the podium surveying the sea of faces, some curious, some hostile, some cautiously optimistic. At the back of the room stood Nolan, arms crossed, expression unreadable. For too long, I began. This company has relied on outdated models that fail to capture the full complexity of today's markets. That ends today. For the next hour, I outlined my methodology in clear, accessible terms, how it incorporated non-traditional variables, how it had predicted market shifts that conventional models missed, how it would transform their approach to risk. This isn't just about avoiding losses, I concluded. It's about seeing opportunities others miss. It's about understanding the stories numbers tell when you know how to listen. The room erupted in applause, tentative at first, then growing more confident. I could see excitement building among the analysts who had been starved for innovation. Implementation begins immediately. I announced department heads will receive detailed briefs this afternoon. Training starts tomorrow. As people filed out, many stopped to introduce themselves or ask questions. I made eye contact with each one, memorizing names, noting who seemed resistant and who seemed eager. Nolan remained at the back of the room watching. When the last person had left, he approached. Impressive performance, he said, his tone suggesting anything but admiration. The board seems convinced you're some kind of prophet. I smiled. Not a prophet, just someone who pays attention to details others dismiss. His jaw tightened. So, what exactly do you expect me to do as your subordinate? Learn. I replied simply, "Starting tomorrow, 8 a.m. my office." The next morning, Nolan arrived at 8:15. I was waiting. "You're late," I said without looking up from my computer. "I had a breakfast meeting with a client," he replied, dropping into the chair across from my desk. I finally looked at him. "No, you didn't. You had coffee alone at the shop downstairs, then deliberately waited 15 minutes before coming up. Don't lie to me again." His eyes widened slightly. "How did you? The cup in your hand is from the downstairs cafe. The sleeve has today's date stamped on it. And you have a habit of using imaginary client meetings as excuses. You've done it 17 times in the past year according to your calendar and the visitor logs." I pushed a folder across the desk. "This is your first assignment, a complete analysis of the Meridian market collapse using traditional models. Tomorrow, you'll redo the analysis using our new methodology. Then we'll compare results." He didn't touch the folder. "This is beneath me." "No," I corrected him. "Until now, you've been beneath it. Actual analysis requires attention to detail and intellectual honesty, two qualities you've never bothered to develop because you didn't have to. Your name got you through doors, but it won't do the work for you." His face flushed with anger. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? This is your revenge for that interview." I leaned forward. "Let me be absolutely clear. If revenge was my goal, you wouldn't be sitting in that chair. You'd be cleaning out your desk while security watched. The fact that you're still employed isn't about my mercy. It's about your potential usefulness." "Usefulness?" he repeated. "Yes. Despite your lack of analytical skill, you have relationships with clients. You understand the company culture. You know where the bodies are buried. So, to speak, that information has value." I tapped the folder. "Now take this and get to work. I expect a preliminary report by 400 p.m. "Wait, you're still with me? Perfect. Most people don't have the patience to hear how true power works. It's not about quick satisfaction. It's about transforming the entire game. If you're invested in seeing how I completely rebuilt this company in my image, hit subscribe now." The most satisfying part of revenge isn't the fall of your enemy. It's rising so far above them that they become irrelevant. The weeks that followed established a new order at WIC. Financial. My methodology was implemented across all divisions and results came quickly. Market predictions proved accurate. Client confidence returned. The company's stock began to climb. One worked 14-hour days learning every aspect of the business, identifying weaknesses, rebuilding from the foundation up. I hired based on skill rather than connections. I promoted those who demonstrated insight regardless of their background, and I watched Nolan Kennewick closely. To my surprise, he actually did the work I assigned. His first analysis was sloppy and incomplete, but he'd made an effort. Each subsequent assignment showed marginal improvement. One evening about 2 months into my tenure, I found him still at his desk at 9 p.m., surrounded by printouts and market reports. "You're here late?" I observed, stopping by his cubicle. I moved him from his corner office to the analyst bullpen, a demotion that had sparked weeks of office gossip. He looked up, dark circles under his eyes, trying to understand this correlation pattern. "It doesn't follow any model I'm familiar with." I glanced at his work. "That's because it's not following a traditional pattern. Look at these 3 indicators. Together, not separately." I spent the next 20 minutes walking him through the analysis. He asked intelligent questions, perhaps the first truly thoughtful questions I'd heard from him. As I turned to leave, he spoke again. "Why are you helping me?" I considered the question carefully because potential without discipline is worthless. "You have the former. I'm forcing you to develop the latter." "You still hate me," he stated. "I don't hate you," I replied honestly. "I nothing you. You're a variable in an equation I'm solving." 2 more months passed. The quarterly board meeting approached, my first chance to present comprehensive results to the full board and major shareholders. The preparation was intense, with teams working around the clock to compile data and create presentations. Through it all, Nolan continued to improve. He wasn't brilliant, but he was becoming competent, thorough, occasionally even insightful. He'd stopped arriving late, stopped making excuses, started asking questions rather than making assumptions. The morning of the board meeting, I found a report on my desk, a detailed analysis of emerging risks in an Asian market we'd been considering for expansion. The work was solid, thorough, not revolutionary, but completely competent. The name on the report, Nolan Wick. I sent him a message. See me. When he arrived at my office, I held up his report. Did you do this yourself? Yes, he said, standing straighter. Every part of it. It's good work. I acknowledged, which is why I'm confused. The time stamp shows you completed it at 2 a.m., but it wasn't requested. Nobody assigned this to you. He shifted slightly. I noticed the indicators while working on something else. They matched a pattern you'd shown me last month. I thought it might be important. I studied him. You did this voluntarily. Yes. Why? He seemed to struggle with the answer. Because it needed doing. Because I saw something others might miss. For the first time since I'd known him, Nolan Wick looked like an actual analyst rather than someone playing a role. You're presenting this to the board today. I decided. His eyes widened. What? No, I'm not prepared to. If you did the work, you can explain it. I cut him off. This is what actual analysts do, Nolan. They find problems and solve them. Then they communicate their findings to decision makers. But the board will see that you've identified a significant risk. That could save this company millions of dollars. I checked my watch. The meeting is at 11 o'clock. You have 3 hours to prepare your presentation. He left my office looking shell-shocked. At the board meeting, I presented the quarterly results first. The numbers spoke for themselves. Our new methodology had transformed the company's performance, increasing accuracy and risk assessment by 31% and boosting client retention by 24%. When I finished, Preston Wick was beaming. Remarkable work, Miss Nightingale. You've exceeded all expectations. Thank you, I replied. But today's most important insight comes from another analyst. Nolan Kennewick has identified an emerging risk pattern that requires immediate attention. The surprise on Preston's face mirrored the expressions around the table. Nolan had been notably absent from board meetings since my arrival. Nolan stood and walked to the front of the room, visibly nervous, but prepared. He connected his laptop and began presenting his findings clearly, methodically, with none of the arrogant flourishes that had once characterized his communication. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. How confident are you in this assessment? One board member finally asked. Nolan glanced at me, then back to the board. Based on the methodology Ms. Nightingale has implemented, I'm 89% confident. The correlation patterns are consistent with previous market contractions in similar economies. And your recommendation? Another board member pressed. Immediate reduction of exposure in these specific sectors, Nolan replied. Reallocation due. The alternative markets I've outlined on page 12. The board discussed his recommendation for 20 minutes before voting unanimously to approve it. As we left the meeting, Preston Wick pulled his son aside. I couldn't hear what was said, but the expression on both their faces suggested something significant had passed between them. Later that afternoon, Preston came to my office. That was unexpected, he said, settling into the chair across from me. His work merited recognition. I replied neutrally. Preston studied me 6 months ago. My son threw your resume in your face. Today, you gave him a platform in front of the board. I gave his work the platform it deserved. I corrected. The quality of his analysis earned that recognition, not his last name. You've transformed him, Preston said wonderingly. How? I haven't transformed him. I've simply created consequences for mediocrity and rewards for excellence. He's transforming himself in response to that environment. Preston nodded slowly. Your 6-month condition ends next week. What are your plans for Nolan after that? I'd been considering this question for some time. That depends on him. If he continues to produce quality work, he'll advance like anyone else based on merit, not bloodline. And if he doesn't, then he'll remain exactly where he is until he earns something different. Preston stood to leave, then paused. When you first presented your proposal to restructure our company, I thought it was about revenge. Now, I see it was about something much more powerful. What's that? I asked. Justice, he replied. The kind that transforms rather than destroys. The following week marked exactly 6 months since I joined Zucker Financial. The company had been remade in ways few could have predicted. Accountability had replaced nepotism. Innovation had replaced tradition. Results had replaced rhetoric. And on a Friday afternoon, I found Nolanwick waiting outside my office. Do you have a minute? He asked. I gestured for him to enter. What can I do for you? He closed the door and stood awkwardly for a moment before speaking. Today marks 6 months. Yes, I acknowledged. It does. I've been thinking about that day, the interview. He looked directly at me. I've never actually apologized. No, I agreed. You haven't. He took a deep breath. I'm sorry. What I did was inexcusable. Throwing your resume, calling it garbage. I was cruel because no one had ever held me accountable. I said nothing waiting. The thing is, he continued, you were right. I didn't know how to do actual analysis until you forced me to learn. I didn't understand value until you showed me the cost of ignoring it. He placed a folder on my desk. This is my resignation. That surprised me. You're quitting. No, he said. I'm applying for the junior analyst position in your department, the proper way with no special treatment. I opened the folder. Inside was a resume, not the glossy credential-padded version he would have had before, but an honest accounting of his actual skills and experience. On top was a handwritten note, not garbage anymore, but still needs work. I looked up at him. Why? Because I want to earn my place, he said simply. And because I finally understand what you've been trying to teach me. I considered him for a long moment. The arrogant heir who had humiliated me was gone, replaced by someone humbled but not broken. Someone who had finally confronted his own mediocrity and chosen to overcome it, rather than hide behind privilege. Allocation accepted, I said. Finally, you start Monday. New office, new responsibilities. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. I won't disappoint you. This isn't about disappointing me, I replied. It's about meeting the standard, the same standard everyone else has to meet. He nodded. I understand. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Nolan. He paused at the door. Your analysis last week saved this company approximately $22 million. That's the power of paying attention to details others dismiss. A small smile touched his lips like a resume from someone without the right connections. Exactly like that, I agreed. 6 months had transformed both of us. I'd arrived seeking revenge and discovered something far more satisfying. The power to rebuild something broken into something better. He'd arrived entitled and incompetent and discovered the satisfaction of earning respect. Rather than demanding it, the following Monday, when Nolan arrived at his new desk in the analyst department, he found a framed document on his desk. The resume he'd thrown in my face 18 months earlier, now enclosed in glass with a small brass plate that read, "Where we begin is not where we end." The most powerful revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's transforming the entire system that made them powerful in the first place. It's creating a world where merit matters more than names, where innovation outweighs tradition, where results speak louder than rhetoric. A world where someone can walk into a room carrying nothing but their ideas and change everything. If you stayed with me through this entire story, you understand something crucial about true power. It's not about quick satisfaction. It's about lasting change. If this resonated with you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every week we share stories of people who transformed painful moments into powerful futures. And if you have your own story of rising above those who underestimated you, share it in the comments below. Your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.